Hello friends, I'm Paul Estabrooks, and today is the second Sunday of Lent. Lent is the 40-day period on the Christian calendar leading up to Resurrection Sunday we call Easter. The 40 days do not include the Sundays in between. That's why Lent starts on a Wednesday and ends on Saturday and Sunday of Easter weekend. There are 5 Sundays in Lent, and the 5th one is known as Palm Sunday as it begins the Holy Week period leading up to the crucifixion on Friday and the resurrection on Sunday. So we have 4 Sundays previous in the Lenten period to Palm Sunday. Today's the second Sunday, and last week I told you the story of a persecuted Christian who had a wonderful, wonderful testimony. His name was Pastor Alice Yuan. Alan spent 21 years and 8 months in prison for his faith in Jesus Christ, and yet after getting out of prison, probably had as much impact in his last 12 years of his life than he did in all of his young years. It's really an amazing story. And what amazed me most was his comment that what he suffered, that is being separated from his wife and kids for 21 years and 8 months, was nothing compared to what Jesus suffered for us on the cross. And of course, this Lenten period is a time when we reflect on the sufferings of Jesus on our behalf. Today I want to tell you about his wife, Alice. Alice met Alan when she was a late teenager. He was a Bible college student at the time, and when she was 20 years old, she married Alan, and they began ministry throughout the countrysides, ending up in the city of Beijing after World War II, and pastoring what became a sizable church in the capital city. And as I mentioned last week, Alan was one of the pastors in Beijing who would not join the government organization called the Three Self-Patriotic Movement that was headed by the Religious Affairs Bureau, people who were not Christians, and whose slogan they demanded people to follow was "Love Country, Love God." Alan felt that was the reverse of what his theology and his practice was. Because of his unwillingness to join, he spent those years in prison, 21 years and 8 months. And of course that meant that Alice, his wife, who had 6 kids, and her mother-in-law, Pastor Alan's mom, although having the mom was a great help at different times, they ended up having 21 years and 8 months with no means of support. Alan was classified as a counter-revolutionary. And of course, because he was and went to prison for being a counter-revolutionary, his wife was categorized the same way. And so there were no jobs that she could have that would have been what we would call normal jobs, like teaching in school or working in an office or any type of job like that. The only work she could get was pushing wagon loads of construction material from one site to another. Heavy, heavy wagons. And she did that for 8 hours a day. And she earned what is equivalent to our 80 cents a day doing that kind of work. That was not enough money to take care of her 6 kids and her mom. And that was the first challenge she said she had, was the ability to take care of her family. And she prayed and she sensed the Lord telling her, especially through scripture and other ways, that he would take care of her. She did not need to worry, that God would provide for her through all these difficult years ahead. She had no idea when she would ever see her husband again, if indeed she ever would. He was given a life sentence. One morning, her mother-in-law came to Alice and said, "Alice, we're using up the last of our rice today. There is no more food in the house. And so tomorrow morning, before breakfast, I'll get up early. I'm going to go to my daughter's place in the other part of the city and see if I can beg or borrow some food from them to take care of the family. Alice said, I was so upset about that. Lord, she said, you promised to take care of me. And now look, we don't have enough food for the kids tomorrow. And she got out her Bible, which in those days, of course, had to be carefully hidden away. We're getting close to the period of the Cultural Revolution when Bibles were actually burned if discovered. She got out her Bible and it fell open to Matthew chapter 6. And she looked down at the page, and the first thing she read was Jesus' statement in the middle of his Sermon on the Mount when he said, if God can take care of the birds that fly, can he not also take care of you? And she's so convicted. She said, oh Lord, forgive me for my attitude. I know you can take care of me. I trust you. I leave myself in your hands as well as my family for your care. And she went to sleep that night peacefully, knowing that the next morning there was nothing to feed the kids. At 5 minutes to 6 in the morning, the next morning, as she was just getting up, getting ready to go out for her day's activities, which I'll share in a minute, she heard a knock on the door. Now, Chinese people are usually early risers, but this was quite early for someone to be coming to another person's house. And she opened the door in her house coat, and there standing in front of her was a lovely lady who said, are you Sister Alice? And she said, yes, I am. She said, oh, I have had such a hard time finding you. Thank goodness I found you now. And she was standing with a big box in her hand, and she pushed her way in the door, set the box down on the kitchen table, and turned to walk out the door and leave. And Alice said to her, wait a minute. What's your name? How about staying and having a cup of tea? And the lady looked at Alice and she said, I have no name, just thank God for that box. And she walked out the door and literally disappeared. Alice said, with trembling hands, I opened the box, and in the box was a big bag of rice, which of course is the staple in East Asian cultures. And there was some vegetables, there was some meat, and there was an envelope. And in the envelope was $50 for a little lady who earned 80 cents a day. $50 was a lot of money. And she got on her knees and thanked God for his provision. And she told me when she shared her story, she said, you know, for 21 years and 8 months when my husband was gone, our children did not miss one meal. She said, we didn't have much money, and there are a lot of things that they had to go with sacrificially. But she said, we never missed a meal. God provided for us. That was the first challenge that Auntie Alice faced. Her second challenge was the challenge of work and of the challenge of interrogation by the authorities. Now, the system in those days, in the earliest communist years of China, was what they called struggle sessions. So every morning, very early in the morning, usually no later than 7 o'clock, she had to be at a struggle session. And for 6 hours, she would be almost like an interrogation. You know, confess your crimes. You are a counter-revolutionary. Confess this crime. And Alice said this kind of haranguing would go on for 6 hours every single day before she even began work. And she said she'd be exhausted. She said, the only way I survived that was by closing my eyes when I could and praying and asking God to give me strength to endure it. There were women, she said she knew, who committed suicide because of these incredible pressures of these struggle meetings. And she said, if I had not been a Christian, I think I probably would have committed suicide as well. but God helped me through them. After the 6 hours of the struggle sessions every day, then she had to do her work for 8 hours every day. And her work was pushing those heavy wagons of rocks and cement and whatever was needed, gravel, for construction sites. And she did that so that she came home late at night, absolutely exhausted. First of all, she was exhausted before she even started her physical labor. And then after 8 hours of that, she came home exhausted. Fortunately, her mother-in-law, being there, took care of the kids most of those hours, made sure that they got to where they needed to go, etc. The final challenge that Alice had to deal with, she says, was emotional and social. The government kept telling her, especially in the struggle sessions, that she would never see her husband again. He's gone. He's in a life in prison and he'll never come home. So you need to divorce him and remarry. And if you marry the right guy, we'll give you a new home and you'll have your record, you will be cleaned, you will not be a counter-revolutionary, and everything will be fine for your family. And there were, of course, men in the community. She's a very lovely lady. You can see by her picture she has big round eyes and a beautiful smile. And she was only 39 years of age when this all started. And many times men would give her gifts of clothing and things that they thought she would like to try and impact her to marry them. One man was so intent on marrying Alice that he even brought divorce papers all filled out and ready for her just to put her signature on, and it would all be done. She said, that was really a struggle because I was young. I didn't know when Alan would come home, if he ever would. And I had, of course, all these children to look after. And of course, it would have been so much easier to care for them if I had a man who was providing for the family. But she would say to every one of those men, I cannot marry you. I cannot divorce Alan. I am a Christian. And as long as Alan is living, I am going to remain his wife. And until I hear that he has gone to be with Jesus, I will remain as I am. And she did. And she stayed faithful until that day when Alan did come home. And I told you last week, when he got to the door, she didn't even recognize him after all that time, except for his eyes. And she knew it was her Alan. And for the next 12, 13 years, he was involved in significant ministry. And she too, she had the gift of hospitality. And so many of us from the Western world would visit their little place. And we always got a warm welcome. Alice didn't speak any English. Alan spoke perfect English. But Alice would welcome us in, and a big, beautiful smile, and of course, a cup of tea, which in China is standard hospitality. She says, I think that it's good when children and families go through difficult times, because they find out that God is faithful.